Every fandom has its popular tropes when it comes to fanfiction, things that just seem to insert themselves into every fan-written narrative you see on Archive of Our Own or Wattpad. From My Mom Swimming to One Direction to Let's Make These Minecraft YouTubers a Family, there's always that one popular plotline that a fandom can't seem to shake. And if we're applying this logic, that every fandom has one unshakable plotline that you see everywhere, then I think we have to talk about a fandom that is so guilty of this that it's actually insane. Harry Potter. Specifically, I want to talk about a type of Harry Potter fanfiction that's been popularized via Wattpad that always opens with an original character receiving an acceptance letter to Hogwarts. Hi, I'm Sophie, and this is one of my first videos on this channel. Really quick introduction to who I am. I go by she, they pronouns. I've been writing and reading fanfiction since I was 11-ish, and I really like video essays. So here I am. Thanks so much for clicking on this video and all of that other stuff that YouTubers are supposed to say. Okay, we can get into it now. Before we begin, there's a few disclaimers I want to give because I feel like you can't talk about Harry Potter in any capacity without mentioning it in some way. J.K. Rowling is transphobic and terrible, and I hate her, just like every other queer ex-Potterhead on the internet. I do believe in separating the art from the artist and the idea that fans can make something their own, and that interacting and creating amongst ourselves is okay and good. Even though this video is going to be picking on some of these fan-made creations, I hope this only contributes to keeping the community alive without input from she who shall not be named. We should be allowed to interact with the world that we like without directly supporting someone like her, and I think fanfiction is a big part of that. On a less serious note, I just wanted to reveal very openly right at the beginning of the video that me being a fanfiction author and therefore a writer at all actually started with the exact kind of fanfiction I'm talking about in this video. Harry Potter fanfictions with unoriginal Mary Sue protagonists. I don't have any copies of my contributions to the genre because I, at some point, realized that it was cringy, but I remember having fun with writing them and little 12-year-old me putting genuine effort into the stories. Those fics did help me figure out some of my early project quirks in a simple way, and they eventually led me to writing more elaborate fics and original stories and generally building my writing skills. So I kind of feel like I owe something to the very trope I'm going to spend who knows how long picking apart. All this to say that this video is purely for fun, and that if you write or enjoy this kind of content, you're fine, and I'm not trying to shit on your hobby. I am also a fanfiction author on the internet. I've just moved on to different niches, and I feel a bit nostalgic. With that, I think we're ready to dive into a trope I've dubbed the acceptance letter plot. Fun fact, this video was originally going to be about Harry Potter fanfiction as a whole, picking up with the modern fandom post-AO3 and Wattpad era, and seeing what the two websites had to offer. And then the segment about types of Harry Potter fics on Wattpad just kept going, and I decided to give a deep dive on that specific type of fanfiction. So here we are, and where is it that we are exactly? I'll set the scene. You're reading a fic. It's one where the main character isn't a canon one from the series, but instead an original character created by the author. This character is likely a pretty white girl, somehow tied into one of the major families from this universe, such as the Weasleys, the Blacks, the Malfoys, or even the Potters. If this isn't the case, she comes from a neglectful Muggle family, and regardless, Hogwarts feels like a savior of sorts from whatever terrible life she lives. This girl, first name Weasley, Black, Malfoy, Potter, is 11 in the opening chapter. She's doing something, maybe waking up or making food or interacting with her family, when an owl appears at her window or drops something on her front porch. It's her acceptance letter to Hogwarts, and this moment jumpstarts the entire 7-year plot. These sorts of fics follow the main original character through their years at Hogwarts, usually during the same time period Harry and his friends are there. This OC, which is the abbreviation for original character if you don't know, is usually the same age as Harry and the Golden Trio, but sometimes they're in the same year as Fred and George, making them a year older, or even a year younger with Ginny. But this doesn't affect much regardless. The focus is usually on the years that Harry is there causing trouble. I also want to just note that when I'm analyzing the trope, I'm looking at the majority of these fics, which take place when Harry and his friends are there, but there is like subgenres of this trope, or like branches off of this trope, that take place during the Marauders era, which is the generation before Harry, which is like Harry's parents and their friends. And there's also like a couple fics that take place during the Next Generation era, basically like what people want to think happened instead of the cursed child. I do talk a little bit more about the Next Generation trope a little later in the video. I'm mostly focusing on like what the majority of these fanfictions encapsulate, which is during Harry's time. Typically, the format is like a few summer opening chapters, some Hogwarts shenanigans, Halloween, and then Christmas break, more Hogwarts adventures, and oh, we're back to summer. Sometimes you get a back to school shopping chapter in Diagon Alley, or the main character somehow ends up with the Weasleys for the summer, so you get more content there. But it's still mostly the same, repeat, until the original character finishes school, somehow getting tied up with the plot of the actual books and falling in love with the canonical character along the way. These fics usually have high chapter counts with short chapters, which is really annoying, honestly. It'll take like 5 chapters to get through one major plot point from the books, and they're each like a page long, so you're constantly clicking the continue reading button. Sometimes these fics will be separated into multiple books, maybe one for each year, creating a series of connected fics, and sometimes it's just one book separated into acts for each year. It's weird. Sometimes the author will just keep going until they realize that they've hit a shockingly large chapter count and then continue on in a sequel. This element is probably one of the most inconsistent among the genre. Like, I've seen the thing where they try like separating it into like one book for each year, but that only works when they aren't basically skipping over the first couple years because they're too young to kiss each other. The Tightly Knit series, which is going to come up again and again throughout this video because Bell 92 made what's pretty much the best example of the exact trope I'm talking about. They just kind of kept going until they hit a high chapter count, and then like would continue on in a sequel, and that's usually how they worked. It's not consistent. Sorry. It kind of sucks. These books almost always have a love interest, and they kind of bank on the readers being interested in that romance because otherwise these fics don't have much to offer. They very closely follow a version of the canon timeline with a few new characters and a romance plot. You read these for the romance, and everyone knows that. The top 3 candidates to fill this canon character love interest role are Harry Potter himself, Draco Malfoy, and Cedric Diggory. Sometimes you see Fred, but not really George, get some love, and more rarely you get stories where Neville or Ron is the love interest. I can think of one main example of this, which is an acceptance letter plot being done pretty well in the Brave and Courage books by Bell 92, a branch off of her Tightly Knit series. This is one where the main character is Kefra Walsh, a muggle born with a supportive but confused family, and it follows her friends to lovers arc with Neville. It follows the format that I've outlined here pretty closely when you look at the bare bones, but it changes a lot of the trends and details overall, and it's really cool. Most of the other books within this series also technically fit this genre. The Tightly Knit series were actually some of the first fics I was exposed to when I logged on to Wattpad for the first time, and I remember really liking it. I've gone back to it a few times, and while the writing style, especially in the earlier installments in the series, is a little more than questionable, the plot and character interactions and original ideas the author came up with still hold up to this day. Rereading it now will never live up to reading through it for the first time as someone who knew little to nothing about fanfiction, but Kefra and Neville's romance will always have a special place in my heart. Keep the Tightly Knit series in mind because it'll come up again and again when talking about Harry Potter fanfiction on Wattpad. It was very popular, and it's easy to claim that it influenced a lot of the fics being written in this genre from the height of its popularity on. I actually had wanted to make like a whole video on the Tightly Knit series, and I have like half a script written for it. I don't think I'm going to go through with making a full video about Tightly Knit because what currently exists of the series, like what's accessible on Bell 92's profile, is very fragmented because they've taken down multiple of the books for editing and stuff, and they haven't updated it in a long time. So it's like, I actually have read most of this series back in the day when I was like 12 years old, but now that I'm 18, like not everything that I remember reading is still accessible on the internet. I don't want to like go against the author's wishes and go searching for an archived version of it. If they took it down, they took it down. So just know that like I have a lot of thoughts on Tightly Knit, and it's something you could talk about a lot because it definitely influenced a lot of the Harry Potter Wattpad fanfiction. Like, I remember when people would make like a little review books, people would often like point to Tightly Knit as like the best example. And like I said, even though it has some writing style issues, it is like a very good look at the type of fanfiction that was popular on Wattpad at the time. Okay, that's all on that. So you got the format. 7 years at Hogwarts overlapping with the plot of the books. Original main character gets paired off with a canon one along the way. There's more to it though, and this is where it gets a bit more interesting. From here, the trope branches off a little bit. The house that the main character is in usually decides quite a lot. For the most part, it's Gryffindor or Slytherin, depending on her love interest or whether or not the author is going for an opposites attract, forbidden romance situation. If so, a girl meant to be with Draco will be in Gryffindor and friends with Harry, and vice versa. If the character is related to a canon family, that might influence it too. There's a lot of Slytherin Potters or Gryffindor Malfoys and stuff along those lines, or maybe they will just end up in the same house as whoever they're related to for simplicity. But these sorts of fics are obsessed with making the character an outcast even when they're conventionally attractive, straight, and white. They do this by making them different than the characters they're related to, using the original character's house and their love interest to do this. Very rarely will this main character end up in Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff, and if they do, it's because they're being set up to be paired with Cedric, or maybe as the girl Harry crushes on instead of Cho Chang. Or maybe this character is related to Cho or Luna, and it makes sense to stick them in Ravenclaw. A character can't just be in a house because it fits them best. There's always a reason tying back to their love interest or their family. Introducing an OC that's related to the Malfoys but ends up in Gryffindor automatically makes them a bit curious to the readers. It's a quick and easy way to make people think. I can definitely see where these sorts of ideas come from. It just stopped being unique and became overdone after the first few times. It's like giving Harry a little or twin sister. Guys, my very first fanfiction ever when I was 11 years old was Harry Potter has a little sister, written in my 5th grade English notebook. And that was before I even knew that fanfiction was a thing. My very first fic ever before I had a Wattpad account was Harry had a little sister, like that exact trope. And I thought I was so creative by doing that because it's an interesting idea to think about. But like after you read it once or twice, it's like, oh, okay, whatever. You know, like it's like that. Putting first name Potter, Malfoy, whatever in the same house as her love interest is also very convenient. So this shifts based off of how easy the author wants the story to be. A forbidden romance plot that crosses over house and blood purity boundaries is more interesting, but it's more difficult than two Gryffindors who spend hours in their common room together and fall in love over potion essays in front of the fireplace. Regardless of how the character's house is decided, it tends to affect a lot, such as who her main friend group is. No matter how old the character is in relation to Harry or what house she's in, it always seems like there's only a few options when it comes to who her main friends are. The most overdone thing is making her an add-on to the Golden Trio, but a lot of fics have been drifting away from this and making her part of the extended Gryffindor group. So this is Golden Trio at its core, but it extends to Neville, Dane, Seamus, Ginny, and Luna, who always come in a pair. You will never see one and not the other. They're always in a pair. The twins and the Gryffindor Quidditch team. Sometimes the main OC gets an original best friend character who will also get paired off with another canon character, but a lot of the time she's best friends with someone like Ginny or Neville or something. That's if they aren't paired off with a love interest too early and given a best friends to lovers plot. The other main option is usually a result of her being in Slytherin, which is where she'll end up being friends with Draco and them. Usually she either doesn't really like him or he's out of character nice to her, and that justifies them being close. A lot of these fics will write Crabbe and Goyle out by saying they aren't really friends with Malfoy and it's just a family connections thing, and instead make Draco's friends Blaise Zabini and Pansy Parkinson. Hey guys, Editing Sophie here. I just wanted to give a little warning that throughout the next minute or two of this video, I repeatedly use the term Silver Trio to refer to Draco, Blaise Zabini, and Pansy Parkinson, because I've genuinely thought for the last few years that Silver Trio was the terminology used to refer to them. Apparently they are just the Slytherin trio, and the Silver Trio is actually referring to Neville, Luna, and Ginny. Because I just went to Google them to find a piece of fan art or something with Draco, Blaise, and Pansy, and all I got was Neville, Luna, and Ginny. What I'm actually talking about is Draco, Blaise, and Pansy. Okay, thanks for understanding. And the main OC will often join this group. The whole Silver Trio thing isn't actually specific to the acceptance letter plotline fics, and I'm pretty sure that it didn't start there either. It's still really common in fics you find uploaded to AO3 super recently, and even though I didn't like it when I was younger, the fan portrayal of rich kids who were neglected and found comfort in each other has kind of grown on me. I will eat up any fic that has them convincing each other to educate themselves on blood purity and slowly redeeming themselves. It's easy to enjoy them in fics because you always know that the redemption arc, or they aren't all bad, moment is coming eventually. It's kind of fun actually, and I think I can make a whole video breaking down the fan portrayal of Slytherin characters one day. This is off script, but I had a little phase where I was reading a very specific trope in the Harry Potter fandom after watching Super Carlin Brothers' video on how they think the series would play out if Harry was put in Slytherin. That's such a popular trope. Somehow Harry ends up in Slytherin, so this could be he gets sorted in Slytherin to begin with, or they come up with some contrived reason for Harry to be resorted later, or maybe he just stays in the Slytherin dorms. And honestly, those fics eat up so hard. I love that trope. I think it's really interesting how the Harry Potter house system works. Canonically, it's kind of stupid, but it is an interesting way to look at a character and how they think of themselves, and creating 4 miniature communities within the school. So putting Harry in Slytherin and seeing how he interacts with everyone is always really interesting, and the Silver Trio is a big thing in those sorts of fics. Back to the trope at hand, some other friend group options for Miss Mary Sue include befriending Cedric. This usually only happens in stories where he's also the love interest. Sometimes she'll be like really close to Ginny or Luna or both because they're always paired up, like I said earlier. This is more common in fics where she's a year younger or just a love good. Who the main character's group decides the OC's role in whatever Harry and Co are doing. If she's just an add-on to the Golden Trio, she's somehow there for everything that goes down and the fic becomes a worse retelling of the original books with an added romance plot. If she's besties with literally anyone else, she may still get tied in sometimes but play the role of slightly confused outsider otherwise. She'll be informed of events through retellings or vague rumors. Authors who don't make her a fourth member of Golden Trio tend to have a lot more wiggle room for fun stuff she can get up to during the school years, leaving space for Hogsmeade trips or class lesson chapters or days in the library or swimming in the lake or Quidditch games. I personally like these sorts of stories a lot more, where a new character isn't forced in the main plot and you get a somewhat normal day-to-day Hogwarts life situation. When the main character is likable and the romance is decent, this makes for a simple but still magical slice of life kind of story. If I wanted the adventure of the original books, I'd just go reread them. I'm reading fanfiction to escape, to imagine what being a student at Hogwarts would be like. I want to feel like I'm sitting through McGonagall's Transfiguration lecture, or sitting in the Great Hall talking about the upcoming Hufflepuff versus Gryffindor Quidditch game and how Diggory and Potter are going head to head and how it's going to be a big show for everyone to watch. I honestly think I just wanted CW level teen drama but on the Hogwarts campus, which is kind of funny because when people talk about the idea of a Harry Potter TV show, not the actual Harry Potter reboot in production right now, but what the fans imagined for a show before that was announced, that's usually what they wanted. Something focusing on the next generation of witches and wizards in modern day without a wizarding war, but with the inter-house dating and Quidditch team jocks. I could probably make a whole video about fan content starting the next generation concept too. Remember how I said it was going to come back up? That was that. This teen drama-like plot can only really happen when her love interest is someone besides Harry, because of course Harry's girlfriend would be in on everything crazy that happens. Even if you pair her up with Draco, she can avoid a lot, but once you hit Malfoy's Death Eater era, it can become a difficult timeline to work with if you want to write something fun and romantic. This can result in skipping over the events of the main story, like, yeah, part of the Wizarding War happened, but first name Weasley is right back on the Quidditch court, and she was just asked on a date by enter miscellaneous love interest here. Because these stories rely on romance so much. Speaking of, there's a lot of annoying patterns in these fics outside of the things I've already mentioned, so let's dig into that. Everyone tends to be in love with the main character, but she still somehow thinks that no one could ever love her. Usually she ends up in a situation where she could get any of these major love interest guys if she just played her cards right, even if it's a forbidden romance situation. This can become very frustrating to read because you know who she's going to end up with, and any additional drama can just throw off the other relationships that would have been left alone otherwise. Pairing the OC off with a canon character usually makes whoever that character's love interest was supposed to be kind of terrible when it comes to characterization. For example, a character designed to be Harry's girlfriend will result in Cho Chang and Ginny just being entirely terrible, and Cho meets the same fate again when Cedric is the love interest. These fics act like you can't just not make those characters have romantic interactions or make them peacefully break off, like it's not allowed or something. I think this is another reason I really like the Tightly Knit series. It avoids this by mostly pairing characters up with ones where their canon love life can just be ignored, like Fred or Neville or Sirius Black. The characters who either died before they fell in love, or ones where they were last minute paired off to a side character no one had heard of in the epilogue. Plus, the OCs in the Tightly Knit universe are genuinely very likable and it's easy to want to root for them. Back to this format overall though, if the love interest dies in canon, they don't hear, but the author will hold on to that reveal like a secret until you get to the point in the plot where they would have died. So, Cedric's new girlfriend will be sitting in the crowd during the Triwizard Tournament, and no one knows if Cedric will be okay, but he'll pop into the crowd just barely breathing, and that's the end of the chapter. Fred's girlfriend will find him during the Battle of Hogwarts, and he'll be on the verge of death, but he'll make it through somehow. These fics tend not to be very creative with how they live, usually using things like, the spell just barely missed, or the power of the love pulled them through, or the OC intervened just before the death would have happened. I totally love to bring Tightly Knit up again, so I will. There, Cedric is saved by knitted socks that the OC in that fic, Eleanor Ross, made using her wand as a knitting needle. The residual magic protected him against the curse and pulled him through, and you know as the readers that he has those socks on, but you have no idea if it's going to mean anything at all, and then it's the thing that saves him. It's creative and different, letting the OC save him without it being basic. You get the feeling that a lot of these authors didn't even glance back at the source material and kind of just use whatever they remembered to write the fic, which results in a lot of random details changing or canonical plot points getting removed entirely by accident. For example, people remember the students getting petrified in second year, but not always what order it happened in or exactly when the students were healed. I can't complain very much, like I don't even always notice it because I haven't touched the actual books since 5th grade, but sometimes it can get a bit confusing as to whether a change was purposeful or not. In addition, sometimes it feels like people forget what time era Harry Potter takes place in. Like, we're in the 90s. Some of the references people make and the technology present and the social atmosphere set up just don't align with that, and it can kind of break any amount of immersion these fics may have. Like, I understand ignoring homophobia and racism, like, please do, I don't want to deal with that in a fanfiction, but, like, when they have an iPhone for some reason, it makes no sense. Why do they have phones? Plus, Hogwarts canonically has that whole thing where, like, technology will blow up if you take it too close to the campus. Like, guys, why are we making Shrek jokes? Why are we making Shrek jokes? It's like 1987. As I said earlier, these fics go year by year. They usually skim over the first few years or even skip them completely, and then slow down around 3rd or 4th year and really focus in on the Triwizard Tournament and the events of the 5th book, then trudge through Half-Blood Prince and the height of the war. I think this is because the Triwizard Tournament and Dumbledore's army happen when the characters are just old enough to have an interesting romance without the extreme trauma of the Battle of Hogwarts. I know why it's like that, but it's still annoying. The 4th year with the Triwizard Tournament is probably the most guilty culprit of this because the amount of time authors spend on that year is crazy, especially the Yule Ball. Like, it's always a huge deal. I know it's like the closest thing Hogwarts students have to prom, but guys, why was first year 1 chapter while the Yule Ball on its own is 17? I think authors get very excited to write the 4th year because of the spectacle of it, which is fair enough, but why not just write a fic that takes place there instead of going through the trouble of skipping through the other years? If you're committing to writing a 7-year timeline, then commit to it. Or just pick up with the characters already being 15 or 16 and cut the bullshit. Some fics in this genre kind of try to do that, showing a sorting scene or them getting on the Hogwarts Express for the first time or getting their aforementioned letter as a prologue flashback thing before cutting to them getting ready for 4th or 5th year. I liked these ones a lot more because when they were done well, you could very easily fill in the gaps on what happened during the time skip and just get into the more interesting bits. In some of the fics where they write out the first few years, it can very much feel like you're waiting for them to be old enough to hold hands or whatever. It can be kind of obvious when the author gets tired of them being 11 and decides to pick up the pace. I personally think this whole acceptance letter plot that I've been talking about for the whole video works best when you change the formula a little bit, when you mix things up. So that's what the next section of the video is going to be about, variations of this trope. So, as I've kind of alluded to, the love stories in these fics are usually long-term slow burn will they won't they's. It works sometimes, like with Kefra and Neville, because they're childhood friends who don't want to mess up their friendship, but other times it can get very confusing as to why the characters don't just date. I guess the trauma of existing as a Hogwarts student during a major wizarding war is a fair enough reason to not be able to commit to a relationship, but still. Some of my favorite fics in this genre were the ones that would have the characters meet when they're older and fall for each other more quickly, cutting the period of we're just friends or we hate each other, and just having them get to know each other romantically. I think fics that choose seemingly random characters as the love interest are pretty fun. Again, shout out to Neville Longbottom from Brave and Courage. Honestly, that fic alone made Neville one of my favorite characters from the Harry Potter universe for a few years, even though I largely ignored his existence when I originally read and watched the series. The writing style of early era Tightly Knit aside, Miss Kitty Bell definitely knows how to make a character likable, even if it's through slightly shifting the personality traits of a canon character. Fanfictions where the character is in any house besides Gryffindor and it actually explores her life as part of that house are always great. The mainline Tightly Knit books do a good job of showcasing the Hufflepuffs and how they interact with each other well. I only ever read Tightly Knit and its sequels and prequels once each. I've read Brave and Courage like countless times since I discovered it at the age of 11 or 12. But like the other ones I've read once. So I remember them showcasing Hufflepuff really, really well and being like, oh, this kind of eats. No, I didn't state it directly, but I'm sure you picked up on the fact that the original main character is just always a girl. I think that's just a result of a lot of these young authors being girls and the trend of fanfiction authors overall being predominantly female for some reason. I can't think of any fics off of the top of my head with a boy as the main OC, nor any with non-binary main characters, but I think that would definitely be fun to see. I like it when the author doesn't make the character somehow related to a major family, or when they're from an original family altogether. I don't know about you guys, but supportive muggle families who don't understand the magical world the main character disappears to every school year is pretty fun as like a side cast. Kefra Walsh's family. If you don't want to go through the effort of making original parent characters, that's fair, but pick a family from the wizarding world that everyone else isn't using. Most of them are related to each other anyways, so making an OC that's a Longbottom still makes her a distant cousin to the Malfoys. There's also adoption and foster care, which are concepts I think could be applied in really fun ways. I don't know if those exist in the wizarding world or not, but if they do, then they could be used instead of stretching our timeline to allow for the Weasleys to have an extra kid or something. I also wish that some of the sibling dynamics made more sense. Like, the original character always stands out from her family to an unrealistic degree, as if she wasn't raised in the same circumstances as them, and it doesn't really explain it. If you want her to be different, make it so that she was somehow raised differently. At this point, I'm talking more about ideas I wish people would write instead of things authors are already doing, but you get the point. The idea of just following a young witch's or wizard's life through their years at Hogwarts isn't terrible. There's a reason hundreds of thousands of people have read these. It just gets boring when it's the exact same thing done a million times over with the exact same flaws throughout all of them. So I'm going to spend the final section of this video talking about why I think this trope is popular as we wrap things up. The original character is usually a self-insert of the author. It's escapism. That's it. That's the explanation, and it's not even complicated. Even if the character isn't directly a self-insert, the whole fic is usually a fantasy fulfillment of some sort, and there's no shame in that. My fics to this day are still fulfilling fantasies, even if they're based around different characters and friendship dynamics instead of romantic ones. There's an argument to be made about that being the reason people like fanfiction or writing it at all, but especially with Harry Potter fanfiction, because who doesn't wish they could go to Hogwarts at least a little bit? Who hasn't put a bit of thought into what house they'd be in, or imagine themselves by the fireplace in their common room writing a potions essay with a quill and ink, or on the Quidditch field or something? I think the setting of Hogwarts and the surrounding area and just the vibe of the world is what continues to keep people tied to the franchise long after it's past its prime and the author has said the things that she has. It's easy to fantasize about even if you've never read the books. Anytime I think about Harry Potter now that my Potterhead phase is ended, it's usually about the school setting in some way. Something about the house system or the classroom sets we see in the movies, and it's not long after that that I picture myself there, even if just for a moment. I know why people read and write these fics because I used to do it myself. Even if the trope is tired and ever repeated, and I spent over 12 pages and 5,000 words poking fun at it, I get why people enjoy it. I could probably go on forever about these sorts of fics and talk about specific examples past the repeatedly mentioned Tightly Knit series, but then we'd be here for however long Dumbledore lived and then some, so I think I'll wrap up here. If you liked the video, be sure to like and subscribe. I'm a fanfiction author and aspiring journalist who just wants to ramble on about her past and current interests, and it would mean everything to me if you stuck around to listen. If you write or read fics in this genre, or you used to, I'd love to hear any thoughts you have on the things I talked about here. Were there any patterns I didn't point out, or a good example of this sort of fic that you want to recommend? Whatever you want to share, I'll probably read it. This was Sophie and the Honeybees with a video on poetry, fanfiction, and other things. I hope you receive your Hogwarts letter if you're still waiting on it. I'm out!